the retelling of Cain and Abel. Welcome to Six Notes of Separation. If you're new to the podcast, here's how it's going to work. Every episode, I dive into an artist, exploring their lives, their music, scandals, controversies, all of the above, but to keep things interesting and to keep things fun, maybe to add a little bit of spice and flavour, if you will, I've put my own little spin on things. Each episode I do has to be linked to the previous and succeeding episode in some way. This could be through producers the two artists have in common. This could be through a label they're both under, a relationship history, an online feud. Truly anything goes, as long as there's a link. Oh, isn't it exciting? So without further ado, I'm going to be jumping into the life of an artist who first gained recognition for his anonymity, but who's now become one of the most successful artists of this century. With 22 Grammy nominations to his name and a Guinness World Record for being the most popular musician in the world. Yes, you heard me right. It's time for us all to dive into the life of the much acclaimed The Weeknd. But before we time travel back to where it all began for The Weeknd, it's time to reveal the link between this episode and last episode's Kid Cudi. Now, my favourite links of all time are always production links, okay? It's always when I look at songs and see that there are producers in common, because I think it sets the tone for a song very well. Like, producers obviously have a lot of say in the behind the scenes work. So when I hear a song and I'm like, oh, this sounds familiar to this, and I see it's a producer in common, gets me giddy as a goat, gets me buzzing as a bee. It's my favourite thing in the world. So you can only imagine my delight when I saw that Kid Cudi and The Weeknd had not just one, but two producers in common. Yes, so the first producer, whose name might be familiar to some of you, is Mike Dean. He's worked across several of Kid Cudi's Man on the Moon albums, as well as dabbling in The Weeknd's discography too. He's also stepped up to be the keys and bass player for The Weeknd when his normal bandmate was away and off. Mike Dean has also opened for The Weeknd on his tour in 2022, and he even helped him put together the artist's Coachella set in the same year. So he's done a lot with The Weeknd, not so much with Kid Cudi, but hey, they've still both all worked together. He's also worked with the likes of Beyonce, Kanye, Jay-Z, Lana Del Rey. Honestly, the list goes on. So yeah, he's pretty big in the industry. Mike Dean's a pretty big name in the behind the scenes part of the music world. The other producer the two artists have in common is the songwriter Benny X, but the connections between Kid Cudi and The Weeknd extend to that of mutual respect too. In 2019, Kid Cudi remixed The Weeknd's song Privilege. They teased the potential of a collab together in 2020, although it's yet to be released, and have continuously showed support for one another by championing each other's musical releases. The Weeknd grew up feeling inspired by the game-changing sound Kid Cudi was known for, which I suppose takes us to the early life of Abel Tesfaye. Born in Toronto in 1990, Tesfaye was raised by his grandmother and mother after his parents split up when he was just a baby. He grew up speaking Amharic, the official language of Ethiopia, where his parents were both from, and he also learnt French too, because I think he went to like a French-speaking school when he was younger. Due to the fact The Weeknd engages in little interviews, the early life of Abel Tesfaye isn't broadly documented, but what I do know is that he dropped out of school at the age of 17 to live with his friend turned creative director Lamar Taylor. In a rather hazy timeline, he had periods of being homeless and getting involved with the police, at which point Tesfaye realised he needed to pull himself together or risk leading a broken life. So this is how Abel falls into music. And it's the first alliance Abel Tesfaye made music under that really sums up what The Weeknd is all about. And I'm going to circle back to it at the end of this podcast. Love me a bit of cyclical structure. But going as Kin Kane, fans were pretty quick to notice the connection between his musical alias and the story of Cain and Abel. Now, I know you guys are all going to get lost at this point. Like, why have we gone into a religious studies lesson? But it does make sense. Okay, you've just got to bear with me. For those of you who are not familiar with the biblical story of Cain and Abel, let me summarise. Cain and Abel were two brothers who both had to make an offering of some kind to God. Abel offered God a lamb from his flock, whilst Cain offered up some crops. God favoured Abel's gift and rejected Cain's, leading Cain to quite dramatically kill his brother out of jealousy and anger. I shouldn't laugh, it's not funny. In Christianity, Cain consequentially became the first person to commit murder and was banished by God to unholy ground, where he spent the rest of his life as a wanderer separated from God. Now, as I said, what on earth does this have to do with The Weeknd? What on earth does this have to do with music and Six Notes? Can Kin Kane not just be a take on King Kong? Where does Abel Tesfaye fit into all of this? But guys, I did whip out some of my English analytical skills, and I just want you to hear what I've got to say, okay? Tesfaye had said in interviews that drugs really became his creative clutch. Without Ket and Coke and MDMA and mushrooms, music didn't necessarily flow out of Abel. It didn't necessarily come naturally to him. So maybe Kin Kane acted as this metaphor for the darker side of Abel, the side of him that was more emotional and more expressive. The music Tesfaye made was not only made when he was in his most intoxicated state, but it also detailed thoughts and feelings he perhaps wouldn't have otherwise expressed. As I said, Kin Kane is kind of like this alter ego. In other words, the choice of names listen, please stick with me still. The choice of name sort of foreshadowed, the dichotomy Abel Tesfaye faced when he turned to music. In order to make the music he wanted, he had to tap into the darker side of himself, metaphorically, air quotes, killing the innocence of Abel. It's not Abel who makes the dark and twisted music, it's Cain. Do you know what I mean? Whilst the Bible story takes place between two brothers, this retelling of Cain and Abel is all wrapped up in one man and his music. So yes, maybe this whole Cain and Abel thing has got a little bit too, let's digest this quote and quote explode. Maybe it's taking you straight back to English lessons in school. But I do think, as it's the first thing I mentioned in this episode, I do think this choice of name is very, very telling for the way the Weeknd's career unfolds. It's very important to the context when looking at Tesfaye's relationship to music. So Kin Kane. He starts out making music in a duo called Bullies and Nerds and is in a production team called The Noise. They upload some music to YouTube in 2009, but it's nothing that's particularly groundbreaking. It's kind of just like your generic school kids trying to make music. But the musical direction of Abel Tesfaye gets thrown upside down and chucked under a bus when he meets a self-starter and producer Jeremy Rose. In 2010, Jeremy and Abel are hanging out in a group when the producer starts playing some of his beats for all of them to hear. Out of nowhere, Abel starts freestyling over this beat, which ends up confirming his spot as the musical partner Jeremy was looking for. It's a miracle sent from heaven for Jeremy, who's really wanting to take music seriously and just can't find the singer/rapper to go with him. Rose asked Tesfaye to ditch The Noise, who he said was making half-assed music, and join him instead in setting up a darker R&B project. They named themselves The Weeknd because they always left home on the weekend to indulge in their rather colourful lifestyle. Their teenage years was very much accompanied by drugs, as I mentioned, very much accompanied by substance abuse, substance use, maybe some petty crimes. I don't know, it's getting crazy. Don't know. As I said, there's not a lot out there on Abel's childhood and growing up. And at first, these two get on like a house on fire. They made 3 songs together, all of which ended up making it onto The Weeknd's first mixtape, House of Balloons. Loft Music, What You Need, and This Morning were all uploaded to YouTube under the handle EXO, drawing a lot of attention online as people not only obviously rated the songs, but they also were desperate to know the identity behind EXO. EXO/The Weeknd kept their identity very concealed at the beginning. They were these anonymous people, and especially Abel, he was this anonymous guy no one knew. If that's not going to grab people's attention, I don't know what is. However, a divide came in the duo pretty quickly when Abel wanted to go down a more clubby, dance tracky route, pushing for Rose to step back as his creative partner and purely produce for him instead, kind of become a behind-the-scenes guy. Obviously, Jeremy Rose became very pissed off. Not only had he made the beats which were slowly blowing up, but it had also been his idea to name the group The Weeknd. With Abel pushing Jeremy further and further to the sidelines, Rose ended up walking out on Tesfaye, saying he could keep the songs as long as he was credited fairly. Following his departure, Abel dropped the E in The Weeknd, so we now know him as The Weeknd, if you know what I mean. And so that's how his professional solo career really began. But for Rose, walking out on The Weeknd was possibly one of the worst decisions he would ever make in his life. Not only was he not credited on any of the songs until many years later, but he also walked out merely months before all 3 songs became great successes. I mean, it's a crushing story, to be honest, it really is. A man from Drake's OVO team, if you don't know OVO, it's just Drake's label. A man from Drake's OVO team called Oliver stumbled across EXO's music on YouTube and passed them on to the fellow Toronto rapper. Drake championed the music through his blog at the time and sort of became this mentor figure for The Weeknd, giving Abel opportunities to get noticed in the industry. Following Drake's endorsement, newspapers such as Pitchfork and the New York Times also wrote pieces about The Weeknd's music. All of them fed off this anonymity. All of them were a bit like Sia. You know how big Sia was with the wigs, and everyone was like, who is she? Like, it created like a cultural phenomenon. Same with like Marshmello. It's the same with The Weeknd. His music attracted people first, but it was the concealed identity which really got people talking and obviously attracted huge newspapers I've just mentioned. In 2011, Abel set up his own record label, XO, with his best friend Lamar, who I kind of previously mentioned. It was this friend he'd lived with since he was like 17, who ended up being his creative director. The XO took on two different meanings. You know, to the common ear, it would be kisses and hugs. Maybe to the less common ear, it could translate as ecstasy and OxyContin, two drugs, obviously. Has Abel clarified what it really stands for? No. I think he says kiss and hug, but I think the fandom says ecstasy and OxyContin. But that's really an irrelevant point. As I said, he released a debut mixtape, House of Balloons, in 2011, wrote, featured and produced for Drake on his 2011 album Take Care, arguably one of Drake's most, if not the most successful album of his to date. So that's huge. Like, obviously writing and producing for Drake is huge alone, but having a feature on that album, that's going to put you on people's radars instantly. He had a performance slot at Drake's OVO Festival, and he went on to release another successful mixtape all in the same year, so 2011 was really his breakthrough. In 2012, his reach only continued to grow. He bagged performances at acclaimed festivals such as Coachella, Primavera and Wireless. He signed to Republic Records, with XO coming under their ownership. He went on his first tour, opened for Florence and the Machine, which I thought was a pretty wild link. And he released a third mixtape, which debuted at number 4 on the Billboard 200 chart. So now he's charting, and now he's gone mainstream. It's quite impressive. But where a lot of artists seem to get stuck in that phase of their career, somewhere in between national fame and international fame / global success, The Weeknd only continued to cultivate his following. In 2016, he took over the Grammys with 7 nominations and 2 wins for his 2015 album Beauty Behind the Madness, as well as earning Grammys for his hit songs Earned It from the 50 Shades of Grey film and Can't Feel My Face, which I feel like, was this in the Trolls movie? Guys, I don't know if this was in the Trolls movie, but when I played, obviously I listen to these artists' music when I'm doing research for them, and as soon as I heard it, it just reminded me of the Trolls. Don't know if that's a bit of a rogue one. I probably need to fact check that. Anyway, Beauty Behind the Madness was so successful that not only did it top the charts and bag a Grammy, but it also became the most streamed album of 2015. Can we just the most streamed album 2015. To put it in perspective for you, that outperformed Adele's 25. It outperformed Kendrick's To Pimp a Butterfly, Justin Bieber's Purpose, Drake's If You're Reading This It's Too Late. I mean, that's absolutely insane. What an accomplishment that only 5 years prior, Abel had just randomly freestyled to this wannabe producer's beat. And 5 years later, he had pursued a solo career, was working with Drake, and had outperformed huge artists, like mainstream artists' albums. You got to give him credit. You really do. Anyway, moving on. In 2016, The Weeknd released Starboy, probably one of his most popular albums to date. If you don't know the name of it, you will recognise the cover. It's kind of been everywhere. It featured a collab with Lana Del Rey, which introduced him to a whole new fan base, and it topped the charts yet again, bagging him another Grammy for Best Urban Contemporary Album at the 2018 awards. I mean, as you'll see with The Weeknd, he never really earns any Grammys for mainstream awards. He doesn't earn Grammys for things like Album of the Year or Best New Artist or Record or Song of the Year, which I brush over this later in the episode, but it is quite a big thing in The Weeknd's career that he hates the Grammys and he thinks they're the scammies. He's like, it's so exclusionary, and people like him, as in people that make music that isn't pop, they don't get the same value that pop music is given. And Tyler the Creator and SZA have talked about this too. Like, it is an issue. Anywho, he also went on to headline Coachella in 2018, and by the time 2019 rolled around, he'd collaborated with some of the biggest names in the industry. People such as Kendrick, Beyonce, Kanye West, Travis Scott, Future, SZA, Ariana Grande. Honestly, the list goes on. This man is full of collaborations. Everyone wanted his name on their albums. But there was one song in particular that changed the whole game for The Weeknd. If there was anybody left who had no clue over who he was, everybody knew his name after the release of Blinding Lights. This song went absolutely astronomical. To chuck some stats at you, Blinding Lights became the first song in the Billboard Hot 100 history to hold a spot in the top 10 for an entire year. This man was in the charts for 365 days for one song alone. It's bonkers. It's actually bonkers is what it is. Another stat for you. In 2021, it was ranked as the number one greatest Hot 100 hit of all time by Billboard. And in 2023, this is the stat you guys need to remember, okay? In 2023, it became the most streamed song on Spotify, accumulating 3.3 billion streams. If you thought that was the end of it, the song's now flirting with 5 billion streams. It is the most streamed song in history. Yeah, I'm just going to let that settle in for a second. Following this global success, The Weeknd's fourth album, After Hours, released in 2020, became the most streamed R&B album of all time. So you're starting to see here how many records The Weeknd has broken. Like, it's mad because I think, again, I've talked about this in SZA's episode, but R&B is so othered in the music industry and so othered in the world. To be honest, people don't realise the insane records that are broken by R&B artists across the world. Like, admittedly, The Weeknd is probably categorised more as like R&B pop, but it was the same with SZA. You know, like with some things, she's broken records over Taylor Swift. But does everyone know SZA's name? No, they know Taylor Swift's name. Anyway, he headlined the Super Bowl in 2021, pouring $7 million of his own money into the performance. He took over Coachella once again in 2022, and a year after that, another stat for you and another record broken, he became the first artist in Spotify history to surpass 100 million monthly listeners. Every time I go on Spotify, The Weeknd is always number one. He is consistently the most streamed artist on Spotify, and therefore maybe the most streamed artist in the world. But in May of 2023, he made an announcement that shocked his fan base and left them at a bit of a loss. He disclosed that after the release of his next album, set to release in 2025, The Weeknd as we know it would come to a close. Though music would always be in his life, he was ready to return to being Abel Tesfaye. So I thought it would be only fitting to have fan Alice join me as we talk about the breakdown, or perhaps the breakup, of The Weeknd. Alice has been a fan of The Weeknd since 2015, and as you'll hear, a lot of her life has been formed by the impact of Tesfaye's music and the community that comes with it.
Thank you so much.
Of course. Before we get into The Weeknd's career from 2023 to the present day, can you tell us a little bit about you and why you became a fan of The Weeknd?
Yes, of course. So I'm Elise. I'm from Lisbon, Portugal. I'm 22 years old. I think the first time I've heard The Weeknd, heard of him and his music was around 2014, 2015, when he first released Love Me Harder with Ariana Grande, or, Earned It. Those songs, The Hills as well. That was the first time I heard of him, in the radio. And ever since then, I loved his music. I loved him. I was super young at the time. I was 12 or something. So I wasn't really, following him or whatever, but every time his songs came on the radio, I was like, oh, I love this guy. And then he came to Portugal, I think in 2017, and I went to see him. It was a festival, and that was the moment I realized, yeah, yeah, exactly. So ever since then, I was just, following him everywhere, Twitter, Instagram, really following every step he was taking at the time.
Yeah, fantastic. And what was it like growing up with The Weeknd to some extent? How did it affect you as you got older? Did it spark some friendships? Did you find yourself relating to his lyrics more? Did it kind of really inform your growing up?
Yeah, it did actually. Like I mentioned, when I went to his concert then in 2017, I actually created a Twitter account, for myself, not as a fan page. But I did try and follow people who also, liked him and were also from Portugal, trying to, find a community that also liked the same artist that I did, The Weeknd, and any other, artists that I also listened to. And I did end up finding a good group of people that I'm still really good friends with to this day. And it was really great.
I love that.
Yeah, it is. While relating to his lyrics and music, for sure, especially when you get older and you go through, start to go through different experiences and everything.
Yeah.
You do kind of feel and this I think happens with a lot of artists, but for me personally, The Weeknd, you start to feel like some of his songs are talking specifically to you and to your situation, which is really odd. But at the same time, it's nice to feel you're not alone and someone else has been through whatever you're going through, even if it's not the exact same situation, but they felt this way, and so you can kind of find some comfort in that. So it was
I was
really,
gonna say it's comforting, isn't it?
and
It feels a bit homely.
Yeah, and that's also one of the things that actually made me, want to listen to more of his music and everything else. Yeah.
And what prompted you to set up a fan page? Why did you choose to invest your time into doing that as a hobby, I guess?
Yeah, so my fan page is really directed towards, his tour, especially this tour he's doing right now, which is the After Hours Till Dawn tour. And, concerts is one of the things I love most in this life. Like, I love going to concerts and everything.
Join the club.
Yeah. And so when he first announced he was going on tour, I was like, this is my chance, to create something, to join these two things that I love so much. So the Weeknd and, concerts, everything. And I really wanted to create a space where people could go and, see the latest news, get some information if they needed to. I try my best to always help people with whatever they need.
That's amazing.
And also for people to kind of be able to enjoy the tour even from home, because sometimes you're not able to travel to America or whatever, being from Europe.
Yeah, 100%.
Myself. So it's nice to have a place where I know, if I go here, I can see everything that's been going on.
Oh, I love that. Well, I left off the listeners with where the Weeknd was in 2023, and I know that you saw him live in that year, and I believe met him backstage. So what was that experience like? Like, that's crazy.
Yeah, I still can't believe it, to be honest. So it was his first concert of the European tour in Portugal, in Lisbon. And one of my biggest friends, Bruno, he also has a fan page, which is really big, by the way. And so he managed to get invited by the Weeknd himself to join him backstage, just to meet him, take a quick photo with him.
How did that happen, though?
Yeah, like, he messaged him. He was super nice. Yeah, he's the nicest.
Wow.
He met a lot of fans throughout the tour as well, not only us, but in like Germany, I think, in Italy. He's really nice. He's always trying to, give back to fans and be with them. He's amazing. And so I didn't actually know if I was going to be able to meet him or not. We were kind of on the edge until the very last second. And then his manager, like his manager's assistant or something, there's a lot of people involved in this kind of stuff. They picked us up from the crowd, like 5 minutes before he went on stage. And we met him backstage. We took a picture with him. He signed our shirt. He was like, as I said, he was 5 minutes from going on stage, and he still didn't rush us.
Insane.
Yeah, he was super nice. He actually wanted to talk to us and like know more about us. You could see he was not doing that just because or just to look good.
Yeah, he wasn't putting on a facade.
No, for sure.
Cared.
He was so nice, and still to this day, I'm really grateful for that. Yeah.
That's amazing. And also, it's so nice that you felt that connection from him, especially having grown up with him as him kind of soundtracking your life. It must have been
it was
quite
insane.
A lot seeing him in front of your own eyes.
Yeah. Because you really can't believe it. For me, it looked like I was watching a movie. It wasn't like my own life happening at that moment.
Yeah, you kind of dissociate in that moment, don't you? And did you play it coolly? Like, did you try and act cool around him, or were you like sobbing, having
No, I kept it really calm, to be honest. Like, I didn't know if I was going to be able to, but I actually was pretty calm. I don't know how I managed that.
That's very impressive. That's very impressive.
No, but he was so welcoming and so nice. So you really did feel comfortable with him. It was not like something, that you felt like you couldn't really speak to him.
It wasn't like a power dynamic.
In person. No. Not at all. It was super nice.
Well, it was on this tour when he was juggling his live concerts with filming for his HBO Max show called The Idol. And to quickly explain for the listeners, because I haven't briefed them on what this is, this show was what many would describe as an absolute disaster. It was it was kind of carnage in some ways. In March of 2023, the Rolling Stone magazine did a whole expose on what was going on behind the scenes. Many crew members said it was carnage, with scripts either being unfinished or constantly rewritten, schedules which were non-existent, scenes scrapped and reshot, and staff literally being fired left, right and centre. Eventually, Sam Levinson, the director of Euphoria, came on the scenes to try and help things out. But I think it seemed to be that he changed the narrative from having some sort of meaningful plot to just becoming way too sexually explicit. So when the show did air, it was immediately cancelled by the public for any chances of a second series, and it was also criticised for being regressive instead of transgressive. It did not go down well. So I'm wondering, with your inside knowledge, did you find that fans started to turn on the Weeknd at all? Did it damage his image in people's eyes, or do people not really care?
To be honest, I don't think that people that were already fans, that it had an effect on those people. You know, I think it was mostly people that were on the outside or that weren't really
Mm,
fans, that, you know, they heard this narrative, and I can completely understand where they're coming from, because listening to this and, you know, not being in the context of what the show was trying to be, like, it really did not feel good, or that
doesn't
it
sound
was
great.
going down as
Yeah.
they intended. I don't think it went, to be honest. But I don't think in fans that it had that much of an effect. I don't think people like changed their opinion on him just because of the show if they were already fans. You know, that's what I feel
Yeah.
happened. Like when I went to his concert, you know, the one I just talked about, it was like the day after the first episode came out. You know, everyone was just having a great time. I don't think anyone was even talking about it, you know.
Interesting. Yeah, because I wasn't sure if
Um,
people would try and do the whole boycott the concert, because you know how
Yeah,
like
no, I didn't
people
feel
get
that
and the internet
at all.
gets.
I also do feel like that's something that only really happens online, you know, on Twitter or whatever. And then it doesn't really
Yeah.
translate into real life and into like what people think of him. Like, I don't think anyone stopped listening to him just because of the show, you know, and fans might have not liked the show as much, because as a fan, you don't really need to like everything that an artist puts out. I think that's, you
No,
know,
yeah.
yeah, so maybe some people didn't like the show even if they were fans, but that's like a normal thing,
It
I'd
didn't stop
say.
them from listening
Yeah,
to his music or
I don't
attending
think it had that much an
concerts.
effect on people that were already fans.
Well, it wasn't the first or last time we saw The Weeknd dabble in acting. In 2025, he dropped what he revealed would end up being his last album, Hurry Up Tomorrow, or at least so he says. A psychological thriller accompanied the album too, another project that also I think came with some poor reviews. But what I want to focus on more is this end to The Weeknd, because I think that's quite rare to have a fan join me for an episode where an artist is kind of putting their music career to bed. When he first teased he would retire in 2023, did you believe him? You know, was there panic amongst the fan base, or did you just think it was something he was saying for the sake of it? Like,
You know,
what did people think?
he had already mentioned something about like changing his stage name from The Weeknd to Abel, which is his real
Yeah.
name. So when he started talking about this again, like retiring The Weeknd, retiring this character, this persona, I did see it more as retiring the stage name, and not like him
Okay.
completely stopping making music. At least that's how I interpret it, and I think that's like the, you
The
know,
right
the general
interpretation.
consensus on things.
Yeah.
So I did believe him, you know, I did believe, and I
Yeah,
do
yeah.
believe he will, you know, stop making music as The Weeknd, so retiring this character, but not stopping to make music completely, you know.
Interesting, because I thought he meant that he would kind of put his own music career to bed, but he would work behind the scenes in the kind of, you know, production songwriting route. I wasn't sure if he'd continue making a name for himself as Abel, or if he would just kind of be in the credits of
Yeah, I mean,
songs.
that's at least how, you know, I interpret it. And I think that's like
Yeah.
what most fans are thinking will happen. Maybe this is just wishful thinking, you know, because we don't really want him to stop making
Yeah,
music. But you know,
in
that's at
disbelief.
least what I think will happen. And I hope that's what will
And
happen.
and when the album did come in 2025, Hurry Up Tomorrow, what was the mood like within the fan base? Because it was quite a long, like, I think, how long was it? Like an hour or so, or over an hour? Like, it was a long
Yeah,
old
yeah, yeah.
album. And I can only imagine, like, so many of you, as you have experienced yourself, grew up with him. So was there a sense of feeling a bit lost that The Weeknd was coming to an end? Like, even despite him maybe perhaps continuing making music as Abel, was there still this sort of feeling with the album of closure, or of having to put The Weeknd to rest as you know him?
You know, there was really, I remember like being midway through the album and thinking, wow, this is really the end, you know, this person or this artist I've grown up with is now like ending and not making music anymore, at least how we know him.
God,
Um,
I'd find that crushing.
yeah, and so it was really like looking back on all the moments that he helped shape, you know, in my life, and all the relationships and friendships and whatever that, you know, were somehow linked to all of this. And it was really, you know, really a heavy thing to,
Yeah, it must
you know,
be really
process.
emotional because you have all that nostalgia that goes along
Yeah,
with his
that's the word,
music.
nostalgia. Like it was looking back and thinking, wow, this is really, you know, weaved itself into my life in ways that I've never expected. And so, yeah, but I think in the fan base, people were mostly like curious and, you know, wanting to know how he would put an end to The Weeknd and what he had to say on this album, because it also came after, he had lost his voice during the show.
Fantastic that you mentioned this because I'm
Yeah.
literally about to
Oh,
get
good.
onto it.
Yeah, so I think people really wanted to know what he had to say and what led to then his decision to end The Weeknd and
And do you
everything.
feel like the album kind of summed up, did it give you everything you wanted from The Weeknd?
I think there's something for everyone in that album. Like you have songs that kind of resemble his older stuff, but you also have like more pop songs that are
Yeah.
more like, similar to the ones he has been releasing for, more recently. So I do think there is something for everyone in that album, which is really nice, and it really ties everything together. And also being part of a trilogy of albums, so
Yes.
there's something that connects the album to the other two albums that came before it. So it's really
And this is
interesting.
yeah, it's kind of cyclical in that way, isn't it? Because his first couple of mixtapes was a trilogy, and then he kind of had his last 3 albums as
Yeah,
The
exactly.
Weeknd as a trilogy too.
That's also a really nice way to end it, I think.
For the listeners that don't know, something that I found quite interesting was there seemed to be a trigger event for him kind of ending The Weeknd, and it was this show that happened. The final show was After Hours Till Dawn tour in 2022. So during the opening song of the show, The Weeknd's voice broke on stage, and he tried to do vocal warm-ups to kind of get it back to scratch, but he ended up walking off and actually cancelling the show. The next day he saw a doctor to kind of ask, what's wrong with my voice? And really, really interestingly, the doctor said, it's not actually damaged. Like it's inflamed a little bit, but it's actually a mental block. Like the reason you couldn't sing was because it was all up here. It was that manifestation of anxiety and pressure that he was feeling that prevented him from singing. And after the show, he had something short of a mental breakdown, I'm pretty sure. He kind of reflected on how quickly everything could fall apart from him. I think The Weeknd knew he needed to address everything that wasn't The Weeknd. I think he finally realised he needed to address everything that was Abel instead, because without The Weeknd, it appeared that Abel was a broken man, completely shrouded in this like anxiety and pressure. So obviously you were a fan during this time, and I'm sure you saw all of this unfold online and in the fan base and stuff. So did you see this show have a big impact on The Weeknd, and did you see a change in his stage presence or approach to music because of it?
Yeah, as you mentioned, it for sure had a huge impact on him, because it seems like it made him rethink everything, like what he was doing with his career and how he wanted to move forward with it from now. And I think that's really what prompted him to, think, okay, I have nothing else. This is what he said in an interview, I think. Like, he has nothing else to say as The Weeknd, like as this character. And that was like a wake up call, or like a sign for him to realize that.
Yeah.
And I think that's a big part of why he's deciding to retire The Weeknd, like this character. As for like his stage presence, I really do think like he stayed the same, after the concert. Like he knew he could do it. It was just, as you mentioned, like a mental block in that moment. It was also recording The Idol at the time. Like he was going back and forth between LA and whatever city he was performing in. So that really must have taken a toll on him. So yeah, I do think like personally and mentally, it must have had a huge impact on him. Otherwise he wouldn't have taken this big of a decision, I think.
Yeah, and I think, but that's it. I mean, it's the fact that that show did lead to as huge a decision as it was to end The Weeknd. The fact that having, an arena full of people looking at you and you're on stage unable to sing, it would be enough to send anyone. I mean, it's a singer's nightmare. But to take that and have a reflection and be like, actually, who is Abel without The Weeknd? I think it just shows him as a very self-perceptive artist, I think, and as someone who's like, okay, this can't be my life forever. Like, I think he sees his mortality as a musician, and I think that's quite rare. And one last question for you before we do some like quick fire rounds. Do you think if it wasn't for what happened in 2022, The Weeknd would never have ended?
As I said, he had like mentioned something about, changing his stage name, or like wanting to reinvent himself in a way. But I do think like all this conversation of rebirth and like being a new person, whatever, I think maybe it was just a big push, or like it led it to happen more quickly. But I do think it had a great, impact. And yeah, I think it would have happened anyway. Like it was bound to, but at the same time, I do think
might have been further down the line.
It might have rushed it a bit,
Yeah, interesting. Well, I've got some quick fire questions for you because that really brings us up to date with kind of the Weeknd's life from 2023 to present day. So, number one, what's one song by The Weeknd you think everyone should listen to?
It's a tough question, because I love so many of these songs.
It's so hard to whistle it down, isn't it?
I don't want to say like a super well-known one because I think, people already kind of know some of his most well-known songs. So I'm going to say House of Balloons, which is from his first mixtape, which is also titled House of Balloons. But this is one of my favorite songs of all time by him. Like, I do think you can kind of, understand his artistry through that song. It's a great song, so I do think if you don't know it, you should listen to it.
Cut.
Yeah,
it's like one of the first songs ever.
Yeah. It's from his first mixtape ever.
Number two, my second question for you is who would you, I mean, I know that he's kind of putting his music to an end now, but who would you love for him to collaborate with if he does continue to make music, or who would you love for him to have already collaborated with?
I mean, he has collaborated with a lot of artists,
Oh my God, so many.
And a lot of them are like also artists that I love and listen to on a daily basis. I do think I would have liked him to collaborate more with like female artists, girls, whatever. For example, Rihanna, which is also one of my favorite singers ever.
Be so good.
He did write a song that ended up on her Anti album. Also with like SZA, I know they have like a song together for
I think they do
Game of Thrones or something, but like an actual song from them, like on
I think they would work so nicely
album,
together.
Would be great.
And number three, what do you want to see The Weeknd do next? Now that he's announced his ending, what do you want Abel to go on to do?
I have no idea, to be honest. Like, I'm just here for the ride. I will, support him in whatever he wants to do next. I do know that he loves acting and like filmmaking, whatever. So I would like to see him dabble a bit more in that because, these two past experiences, I know they haven't been, received that well for people. But I do think that's something that he likes to do so much. If that's something he wants to do, I'd say go for it and, get better, whatever, try to improve. No, but for real, like try, if you really like it, like why not keep going? But also with music,
hone the craft.
Like I really have no idea what's in store for us and, for Abel or The Weeknd. I don't know what he's thinking of doing musically, but I'm really curious to see where this is going next.
I think that's where it's all kind of been left off, hasn't it? It's all been left.
Yeah, because
like
we have no like leads to where this is going.
Yeah, it's not like he's teased something. Don't worry, I'm going to be working on this project. It's like, oh no, The Weeknd's ending, and
and we are just
getting given.
Okay, now what?
Yeah. And for anyone that wants to find your fan page, where can they find you at?
Yeah, it's on Instagram and also on Twitter at AHDawnTour. So after us, Dawn Tour.
Well, thank you so much.
Thank you so
That's
much
all
for
there is
having
to this. It's been so great to have you on. It was so great to have Alice join me for this episode. I really can't thank her enough for sharing her insight. And, it's quite a rare occasion to be doing an episode on an artist where their music and career has come to a close. It's not like they're at the peak of their career or going to continue to make music for years. Like this is an artist we're talking about who's saying it's all over. And I think it's really special that Alice was able to join me for this and talk about how it feels to be a part of a fan base that knows their community is gonna sort of end. In terms of any other controversies The Weeknd has stumbled into throughout his career, he's actually done a pretty good job at staying clear of lasting stains on his name. To run you through some headlines, in 2015, he got arrested for punching a police officer who was trying to break up a fight he was involved in. From 2015 to 21, he got in a series of plagiarism battles, the majority of which have been resolved with undisclosed settlements. He called out the Grammys for being exclusionary in 2021, as I sort of brushed upon earlier, and inserted himself into the rap beef between Kendrick and Drake last year, alluding to the fact that he turned down an offer to be signed to Drake's label back in 2012. I mean, yes, it's a list of things which has caused him minor grief, but that's exactly it. Like, it's minor grief. All of these are minor issues. Like, none of this has ever really been enough to damage his name. And I think the biggest damage to his name is the idol. So to conclude, though Abel Tesfaye has been one of the most successful artists of this decade, breaking countless records for the reach and scale of his music, It seems to be that his whole career has been defined, or perhaps summed up, by the first name he ever chose to be recognised under. The story of The Weeknd is really the story of Kin Kane and Abel Tesfaye. It's really the story of Cain and Abel. Where Abel could have led a life free of substance abuse and mental breakdowns, Kin Kane cut his time short by turning to music. By using drugs to feed into the dark storytelling that underpins his work, The Weeknd drowned out any sense of who he really was. He perhaps let the real Abel die without even realising it. Not only did Cain strike once by putting an end to Tesfaye, but he also striked again when cutting off Jeremy Rose from being his partner in crime. And so perhaps it can be concluded that ever since, The Weeknd has been left to face the same fate as Cain did in the Bible. He's been left to wonder with nothing around to guide him. In an act of oblivion, Abel Tesfaye wrote his own finale. From the moment he chose to be known as Kin Kane, he also chose to end The Weeknd. Thank you all so much for listening to this episode. If you want to keep up to date with all things Six Notes or Separation, make sure to follow us on Instagram and TikTok at Six Notes Podcast. Also, give us a little message, do a little comment if you want to be a future fan on the show. And whilst you're at it, be sure to check out Alice's socials at AHDawnTour on everywhere. Instagram, TikTok, wherever you want to check out her fan page. I'll be back very shortly with another episode on another artist where we'll be exploring the link between them and The Weeknd.